I thought I'd talk a little bit about a 251, where they come from, what a 251 means, because it's so important. I have discussed this in the past. I've been shooting these videos for a couple of years, so there are some things that I have discussed in the past. Let's begin by just looking at a C major scale. So that's what I've got written here, except it's just in one octave. And when we take that C major scale, I should get a t-shirt that says chords come from scales, because I've said that so many times. But that's right, chords do come from scales. So if we take the first note of the C major scale, the third, the fifth, and the seventh degrees of the scale, and then that would give us a little arpeggio as well, right? We could extrapolate that arpeggio through, two octaves. But let's just stick with the chords right now. So there is a C major 7 chord. That's a nice simple voicing of a C major. And now what you have to think is that where did that C major 7 chord come from? The C major 7 chord came from the C major scale, and we started building the chord from the first degree of the scale, and in tertian harmony in thirds, we go take a note, skip a note, take a note, skip a note, take a note, skip a note, take a note. That gives us the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7 of the chord, spelling a C major 7 chord. Then we go to the D minor 7 chord. We call this the 2 chord in the key of C. We call this the 2 chord because it starts on the second degree of the scale, and we go through the same process. Take a note, skip a note, take a note, skip a note, take a note, skip a note, take a note. And that's going to give us a D minor 7 chord, the 2 chord. The 2 chord wants to go back to the 1 chord, to the tonal center of the key, which is C. All right, and we call that chord a subdominant chord, good enough for now. A subdominant chord function. It functions as sort of a medium tension chord. And then we move to the G7, which is the 5th degree of the scale, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we go through the same process, take, skip, take, skip, take, skip, take, which will give us G7 chord, or the 5 chord. And the 5 chord invariably wants to return to the 1 chord, because in the 5 chord we have that strong tritone which resolves back to the 1. So the most common progression in jazz standards, and in many other standards, jazzy standards, pop standards too in some cases, the most common progression is a 2, a 5, and a 1, meaning 2 and 5 and a 1. And 5 and 1, right? And it makes sense in terms of its tension and resolution. Okay, so the 1 chord, speaking of tension and resolution, has no tension. It's a state of resolution. The 2 chord is sort of a medium tension, and it leads to either the tonic or the dominant. The 5 chord is high tension because of that dissonant tritone, and it only wants to lead to the tonic. Now, the reason I'm doing this today is I've been talking about the blues quite a bit recently, and playing chord tones in the blues, for in the key of A, So the chord tones, playing sort of in the chord tones in the key of E. I'm emphasizing the chord tones, the notes of the chord. And what I'd like to impart here today is a great method of practice is to take a simple 2-5-1 chord progression and start to play the chords in chord tones as if you were soloing. So if I were to take the arpeggio of the D minor, right? You can hear that. So let's do that again. G. This isn't like learning how to solo. I'm just building the template of each chord, right? And then resolution. So you take a 2-5-1 progression like this, just as simple voicings, and then imagine the arpeggios below each of the chords. You can hear those chords changing. You don't necessarily have to play long form arpeggios. You can play short lines. With that approach, you don't have to be thinking like, I'm doing this scale, this altered scale, and that mode, and this, forget it. This isn't modal, it's chordal. It keeps the purpose direct. You're attached directly to defining the chords, and by defining the chords, you're going to be much more clearly defining the melody as well. You're going to be in the right places. Work on this whole idea of 2-5-1 chord progressions. Of course, you can take it to any key, but focus on for now. I would say just sticking to the same key. If you want to move up the fretboard, you could do D minor and then G7. C major, right? You can move up the fretboard a little bit too, and then you can start connecting the fretboard. Okay, that's all I wanted to say for today. Just a little bit of a recap of how important 2-5-1 progressions are and how important it is to understand the foundations of how all of this works. Okay, have a good day. Thanks for stopping by. See you soon.